Hi, I'm Larry Dignan with Constellation Insights, and we're here with Matt Lewis. He is CEO of LLMental, a company that just launched. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
So, I guess for starters, congrats on the launch of the company, and walk me through what your vision is, and what the master plan is.
Yeah, so when we last spoke in the summer, LLmental had existed as a venture studio. We'd launched it in the spring of 23 as a kind of incubator of sorts to accelerate considerations out in the ecosystem that were progressing ideas and innovations really focused on the overlap or the juxtaposition between artificial intelligence and mental health. And there are a number of these considerations out there where entrepreneurs and visionaries are trying to find ways to kind of speed time to decision across the mental wellness and mental health environment. And we're fortunate to work with a number of individuals like that in the time from really like summer 23 to spring of 24. But we found that that a lot of the groups were either too early stage to really benefit from the type of experience and counsel that the team could offer, or that a lot of the really kind of extant challenges, the kind of thorny problems, if you will, that exist out in the world were still going unsolved. And we recognize that in order to really kind of try to really add value into the environment, that it was going to require a different type of business model to really address those challenges. So we matured the business from this kind of venture studio model of investing time and effort and resources to accelerate other businesses, and transition from a studio to a kind of firm of the future, a modern enterprise, which is what LLmental has now become. So LLmental, instead of kind of investing in other businesses, is now kind of a business of businesses, all focused on the thesis of mental wellness, which is the idea of really leveraging generative artificial intelligence to improve the mental wellness of people out in the world.
So, does that mean like therapy, cognitive therapy, or I guess how does this play out, in the mental health space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So we started by trying to first articulate what some of the challenges are that exist, that people have, and that they're struggling with today in 2024, and that they might continue to have over the next couple of years and into the kind of distant future, like say 2031. I think when you start looking beyond that point, it's kind of hard, at least for me, to imagine what life is like either here in the States, or what it's like even on planet Earth. And maybe we've started kind of sending folks out to the moon or Mars or other places, but when you get past that point, at least for me, it's a little bit hard to kind of imagine what life is like. So we tried to kind of take a future forward look at kind of what life is like for humans, for people, and imagine what challenges they exist. So we drew up a list really of, there are 17 thorny problems, or problems that people have that have perennially gone unsolved, that are all kind of blue oceans, or really kind of areas that don't really have any real innovation in them, and that could potentially benefit from a kind of first principles AI native consideration that could really add a lot of value if there was an offering in that space that added real consideration for people that struggle with those challenges. So, for example, in the, I think you mentioned therapy, in the space with individuals that have serious mental illness. Some people might find their way to therapy, and it provides some value. Some people might find their way to modern medicine, and they get on an SSRI like Paxil or Prozac. They might find their way into some other type of intervention. And there are a ton of companies out there that are trying to democratize access, trying to get people into more uh, areas where they can see a clinician, like get therapy into someone's hands if they can't go see a doctor like in Manhattan or in LA or in Chicago, for example. And that's great. You need to do that work. But there are so many of those types of organizations already doing that, that for us, it wasn't one of those like high priority challenges to try to tackle, because there are a number of organizations already doing that work. And being the 51st or the 108th organization in that space to us was not attractive. The area that we tried to kind of focus on would be incremental to that, if you will, that could help really kind of provide some consideration, some novelty that has not yet been explored.
What are some of those areas?
So in serious mental illness, the conversation has historically been really over the last, say, 60 years on harm avoidance, in trying to avoid really bad outcomes, terrible outcomes for people that are suffering. And say, think about, say, depression as an example. In this country, there are about 3 million people that are diagnosed with depression, and globally about 300 million. Most of the modern medicine infrastructure, whether it's in psychiatry or psychology, primarily exists to ensure that people that get into therapy or get into modern medicine have some type of response to their treatment, that they benefit, that their mood, their affect, it gets better, and that they lessen the likelihood of harm. That is, that they're less likely to die by suicide. And it is essential that people that are suffering don't die by suicide. I definitely don't want to downplay or minimize that conversation at all, but it is the case in almost every setting. And in my previous role as chief AI officer at Inizio Medical, I led a number of launches of pharmaceutical, medical device, neurotech, digital therapeutics products in mental illness. It's often the case that that's where the conversation ends. Like if you can prevent people from dying by suicide, in most conversations, the clinician, the care team, the individuals themselves, like that's what good looks like, is not dying by suicide. And the conversation pretty much ends there. There really isn't the type of conversation that other therapeutic conditions, other diseases, other parts of the world tend to have, which is, okay, well, you're still here, you haven't died by suicide yet. How is your actual quality of life? What does your decision making capability look like? And what are your social relationships like? How is your work setting? How is your relationship with your wife, with your kids, with your dog? Have you actually gotten back to the person you were before you were first diagnosed with depression? What's called kind of like getting into remission, if you will, or getting past remission to recovery. And those things, if they happen only kind of by accident. They're really not engineered to happen by the medical establishment, and there's really no kind of assistance for the person who's suffering to go from diagnosed to kind of design for recovery, or from kind of they're in the system and they're in remission and they get to recovery as an intentional outcome. So our business in that space, which is called LLMental, uses generative AI and some machine learning as well to help people progress from diagnosis to remission and then ultimately to recovery, so they can build a life worth living that they otherwise can't get through traditional offers.
So is this a case of the model coaching and you check in every day, or I guess how does it work in practice?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
diagnosed, you're not committing suicide, and then
mhm.
you're talking to a model over time and check-ins. I guess how's it
Yeah,
work in
yeah.
practice?
That's definitely like a supernatural question to ask. It is an everyday engagement, but it's not talking in the sense of like talking to ChatGPT.
Hmm.
I think if you think about mental illness or kind of diseases of the brain, as a kind of a general class, it's kind of like taking a first principles approach is very helpful. Like taking a beginner's mind, child's mind approach. And there are a lot of things about the way we treat these conditions now in 2024, or even fast forward in 2028, when most of the world will be using generative AI, for example, when adoption is more robust than it is at present, that just don't make a lot of sense, like at all. That make no sense at all. They made sense, but perhaps in like 1900, when Freud first kind of came up with the idea of psychiatry, or in the 1960s when we took people out of the mental institutions and kind of brought them into the community. But they really make very little sense now. And like the one thing that makes almost no sense at all to us as a founding team of this weird mental business is that if you have depression, it's at least in the US, you'll probably see your psychiatrist maybe once every 3 months for about an hour. You'll see maybe a therapist maybe once every 6 weeks for an hour. So that total time with a clinician adds up to about 24 hours per year, or maybe about one day of every 365 days. And the other 364 days, you're literally left alone, unsupported, with no engagement, no resources, no information, nothing. You're just in your head, torturing yourself all the time. So for 99.1% of the time, you're alone. And for 0.9% of the time, you have someone, somewhere. So LLMental is really designed to be kind of like a co-pilot for your mind that can help you architect the life that you're meant to live when you're in your mind the 99.1% of the time. Not a chatbot per se, but something that helps you kind of scaffold the types of interventions or activities that are helpful and peer-reviewed, evidence-based, that lead to improvement in your quality of life, so you can get back to being the person that you're meant to be. It's more like a kind of Spotify, if you will, or Pandora, depending upon which side of the music spectrum you're on, that creates a playlist of things to do, activities or interventions, experiences, if you want to call them that, that is highly curated, hyper personalized, and tells you as the sufferer what's right for you on Tuesday morning at 11:17 on December 10th. That might be different on Friday, December 12th or 13th, because the weather's different, or it's sunny out, or you don't have work that day, or you're with your family, and the types of considerations and contextual considerations are going to be completely different. So it's really a platform that makes sense for the world we actually live in today, as opposed to when psychiatry was first invented 120 years ago.
So how does the prompt work? Does it basically you set up an app and then it gives you suggestions in the morning? I'm just trying to figure out the engagement model.
Yeah, it's not a prompt. It is a native platform that we have already built, and so people can't come into the platform unless they are diagnosed with depression. We have a handshake with a medical record firm that validates that someone actually has diagnosed depression. Otherwise, they're not welcome into the platform, and that's both a safety and a trust consideration, so that people that are in the platform know that they're only involved and talking to other people like themselves. That it's a big challenge in the mental illness community, that people feel like they're alone, that this is a real kind of declaration that they're not alone, but also when they're talking with each other, with other humans, that they're only talking to people that have their best interests at heart, that are facing similar struggles, that are not with people that are potentially trying to take advantage of them or exploit them or do things that are unhelpful. So it's a validation that they're in the right place, and then they're getting a objective validation of where their world is, the types of responsibilities and challenges they have. Most of the kind of capture of what their world looks like is passive. They don't have to do very much to get a very highly curated, personalized version of what their life plan looks like, a kind of recommendation or kind of prescription, if you will. And then it contextually adjusts, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, based upon what their responsibility set looks like. Is it parental? Is it professional? Is it personal? What are they doing? And they can make some adjustments to it. But it's not an avatar. It's not a chatbot per se. It's more kind of a assistive consideration to help them figure out kind of what they should do and when they should be doing it, so that instead of getting trapped in like doom scrolling on social media, which is not helpful, they're doing things that are useful for their mind and for their other relationships that help them progress forward and kind of build that like 10% improvement every day.
So what does the underlying tech stack look like?
Yes, that's a good question. So we started building the early generative stack in the platform that exists at present. And so it is an AI native platform, and just like Netflix or now Spotify has kind of become AI powered. Most of the major platforms, the recommendations that someone gets served up are machine learning driven. So they're informed by past practice as well as by the literature in terms of what works for them and what's relevant. We have almost 2,000 experiences, interventions, and activities that have been curated at this point. And those things fall into three large constructs, which are people, that is like the social interaction someone has with their neighbors, their friends, their family, their coworkers, their religious community, people that are actually in their life, if you will. Their place, which is largely like their home, their place of work, their place of worship, their neighborhood, things like that. And a lot of it has to do with like Maslow's hierarchy, so like whether they feel safe and secure. And then the third area is around their purpose. So do they feel that they're contributing their voice to the world? They have meaning? What do they? Why do they wake up every morning? What is their kind of role in the world, if you will? And all the interventions kind of ladder up to those three categories. The categories are not things that we created as a team. They come from the literature, and they were talked about extensively in a book that Tom Insel, who used to be the director of NIM, the National Institute of Mental Health, published about 3 years ago, called Healing was his book. And he after running NIM for over a decade and spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money, he kind of admitted in this kind of come to Jesus moment that a lot of that money didn't really add a lot of real meaning or help to people that were suffering with mental illness, that they learned a lot about how the brain worked, but it didn't really change people's lives. People were still suffering just about the same as when he took office. And that he realized after being in the role for almost 12 years that what really changes mental illness is this kind of social cure, this mix of people, purpose, and place. And in all the years since leaving him, Tom has stood up a number of startups, mostly focused on doing the same type of thing, but in the community, leveraging technology, but helping people in the community. We're doing the same type of thing, but leveraging artificial intelligence. So it's a established framework for how do you help people that have a biological disease, mental illness, progress forward with a social cure.
So you're training the models with the medical literature?
That's right.
Okay. What's the base model, and do you anticipate swapping that out? Like if there's another latest greatest model, I mean, Google has, I think it's Palm LM or something like that.
Yeah, it's built on 3.5 initially, for a number of reasons. Some that were opportunistic, some that just made sense for kind of where the initial kind of descriptions of the class were. So we're using this part of generative primarily to help people build self-efficacy, that is, get to a place where they can understand why the thing they're being told to do is relevant for them. And generative sings in this space. Generative is exceptional at this. So people are always kind of struggling. I know you have this conversation with a lot of other AI experts that talk about use cases, like what's the use case for AI in finance, what's the use case in life sciences, what's the use case here. But this is an amazing use case of generative, is that depending upon who the user is on the other side of the platform, it does a great job of helping them come to terms with at what stage of change they are in the readiness adoption paradigm, coming to meet them at their level, and then talking to them at a level they can understand so they can internalize it and get ready to actually do it in their life. And I don't know a single technology that does this better than generative. And 3.5 is actually quite good at this. The later models have other benefits as well, but just as we're a small team, we're still building, we're still trying to evaluate what the right path is as we kind of go to market and scale up. But it's really a summarization and a contextualization for the person that is dealing with a number of challenges. And I think, while everyone that's in the space is rational, there are a number of cognitive challenges of being depressed, for example, that make it difficult to make decisions. And we're trying to help improve those by improving someone's quality of life. But it's not uncommon for someone with depression to have what's called brain fog, where it's, they get a little bit confused or hard to make decisions, or to have executive dysfunction, have memory problems. So you don't want someone that has challenges thinking to have to go through 80 pages of literature, or to have to go through 40 PowerPoint slides, or to have excessive content or copy on an infographic. You need it to be really simple and easily understood and annotated and evidence-based and referenced. So they say, okay, I'm going to take a 20-minute walk in the woods by myself without any other people or my dog. Here's the reason why. Here's the literature that supports it. Here's the benefit that it's going to accrue to me in the next 5 minutes immediately following. And here are some ways I can contextualize it to make it relevant for me. Maybe I can use my AirPods, or I can listen to my phone in my pocket. I can put a track on. It's going to help me understand the birds in this environment, blah, 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 whatever it is. Generative does that exceptionally well. And so these are like kind of red thread considerations where it helps bring the platform to life. But if we're doing our job right, the user doesn't really see the AI. It kind of like helps make the platform work, but it's not really visible to the average person.
Yeah, great stuff. Anything I didn't ask that I should have?
Yeah, so that's half the business. That's the kind of serious mental illness side of the business. The other side of the business is on the enterprise side. So if LLmental is B2B2C, it's focused on people that are suffering with serious mental illness. The other side of our business is on the B2B side. It's called Transfermental, and it's focused on really workplace well-being. So any organization really, although we're really looking at organizations in health and life sciences, since that's where we've worked for most of our career, that are trying to adopt artificial intelligence for the most part, which is the major kind of transformation challenge of the day. And your groups, people you've spoken to, I've been doing this work for years, have the best intentions with trying to adopt AI in the modern enterprise. But truth be told, it's not going very well in a lot of places. There
Right.
are some standouts where those pilots and POCs do turn into scalable success, but they are exceptions. They're anomalies. There's many more failures than there are successes, and it is our thesis in the transformental business that a lot of the reasons why AI adoption is not succeeding is what the literature calls human factors. This is in the human computer interaction space. The human factor consideration is almost entirely psychological. I'll tell you, when I got promoted from chief data analytics officer to chief AI officer at Nizio 2 years ago, I ran a town hall across the whole organization saying this was our thesis for augmented intelligence. It was humans and AI working together to do more than humans can do alone. Everyone's heard this kind of story by now across the group. I had a senior leader in the business in our UK office message me on Teams right after our town hall saying this sounds brilliant, but I'm so concerned that once you do this, you and your boss are going to come to me 8 months from now and lay off half my group, and I'm going to lose my job. And he's like, you're pretty much doing this, but you're saying robots are going to take my job. And it was the fear that he had was palpable. Like he was deeply concerned that by us being successful, he would be unemployed. And it was like, I've heard this kind of retort now hundreds of times from audiences I've spoken at, conferences, podcasts. This is like one of the biggest concerns people have. And in most transformation settings, it's not that I think that leaders in these businesses are malicious. They're not trying to hurt people, but I think they don't know what to say, and they don't know how to support teams that have anxiety. They have depression already. They're burnt out by very high workloads. There's a lot of pressure in the environment itself. And we've also seen when they are supported, when their mental health is robust, when they are mature and they have a mindset that's growth oriented as opposed to having a fixed mindset. I did a white paper with Connor Grennan, who leads AI at NYU last year, on this exact topic, that the outcomes for the business are significantly stronger. The success rates for AI adoption are much more robust when the organizational health is stronger. McKinsey has a lot of published work on this topic, that when the organization has a culture, a mission, a vision, and principles and values that they actually live by, as opposed to just put on the wall on a framed poster, they actually live by them and implement them. And when leadership communicates with transparency and dignity and respect, the organization is more likely to be resilient through change. And when they don't do that, lots of bad things happen. And Transformental is really designed to solve for the mental well-being side of that equation, to help businesses recognize, hey, you spent $26 billion on generative AI adoption across the business, and 23 million has been wasted thus far. Why is that? So go before you spend another 50 million. Maybe we stand up an intervention to upwell, that is, improve the mental wellness of your group, so that maybe 80% of that spend is actually going to work, and people will adopt the platforms that you intend to put forward. And before you go spend another $50 million on building generative AI native platforms that will be obsolete before they're built, we can make some better decisions and power forward for the future.
So it's all well-being when you boil it down. Thanks for joining us, and good stuff. I look forward to see how all this develops.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks to the audience for listening.